Hello everyone and welcome back for another edition of the Money Pros. I'm Oliver Tutt, Certified Financial Planner Practitioner. I'll be your host for the next half hour as we talk about all the issues related to your money. How to make it, how to keep it, and hopefully how to help it grow. Let me give you an idea of what we've got in store for today's show. First up, the question, do investors and savers need to actually be protected from themselves? Some new research would suggest that they definitely do. So we're going to talk about the results of a recent study that was done. We have as a guest none other than our real estate pro, Chad Kritzas with Keller Williams Realty. We're not going to be talking about residential real estate. We're going to be talking about investment real estate, specifically multifamily houses. So we've got that to look forward to, talking to Chad. And then in our third segment, I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't take any investment advice from Pat Boone. You know, the singer who's on TV all the time telling you banks are going to collapse. We're going to talk a little bit about that and why following his advice might not be such a good idea. So we have that to look forward to. And then finally, in our last segment, I'm going to cover a viewer question on contributing to IRAs. It is, after all, IRA season with tax season upon us. So we've got all that to get to. But first up, we're going to be talking about a new study that I read about recently in the Wall Street Journal. And it kind of counteracted some of the typical advice that I would actually give to clients, or what I think, or what I would normally think that clients would deem important when they're selecting investments. And so it raises a question, do we need to be protected from ourselves and our own worst interests? And do we in fact want that protection? Most times when a client is selecting an investment or we're evaluating investments, we talk a lot about liquidity, and we usually consider liquidity or one's ability to get the cash out of their investment with little damage to the investment itself. We usually talk about that as a positive thing, but the question comes up, is that really a positive thing? And it turns out in many cases investors aren't so interested in liquidity. In fact, they may put some preference on having some type of restrictions associated with their investment. So I want you to imagine the following scenario. Imagine that you had, let's say, $5,000 and you wanted to put that in an investment, and in 10 years you were going to take it out for a particular goal. Let's say it is to buy a second home or to buy a car or something like that. But you're going to put this $5,000 away. You want to get the best return possible, but you're evaluating a bunch of different investments and they have different characteristics. Let me put up a slide and we'll give you 3 different options and see what you would actually choose. So you're saving choices. The first option is you can earn 7% interest in this investment annually over the next 10 years, and there are no strings attached. If you decide you want to take that money out in a year, 2 years, 5 years, you'll get your $5,000 investment and whatever interest you've earned up to that point. Second option, the same 7% interest, but if you take it out before that 10-year period is up, you're going to lose all your interest. So you'll get your $5,000 back, but you'll lose any interest that you earned if you take it before that 10-year period is over. Third choice, again, the same 7% interest rate will be paid to you, but you are not allowed to touch it at all. The contract says you can't withdraw the money, you can't request it, there's nothing you can do, you will not be able to get the money out. Now, conventional wisdom would say that most people would select option number 1. I earn the 7% and there are no strings attached. I can get at that money anytime I want. But interestingly, and that's what economic theory would suggest, but interestingly, a new study that was recently done where Americans were surveyed suggested that Americans would actually make some different choices. In fact, 80% of Americans chose to put at least some of their money into one of the accounts with a restriction. So that $5,000, 80% of Americans actually chose that at least some of that $5,000 they would put into one of the accounts that actually had restrictions attached to it. When they were given a choice between only 2 of those investments, one being the no strings attached and the other option being something with restrictions, not only did most people choose an account with the restrictions, but nearly 50%, they allocated nearly 50% of their money to the account with the restrictions. So rather than allocating 100% to the no strings attached fund, most people chose at least 50% going to one with restrictions. Finally, the more restrictive the restrictions actually were, in other words, the worse it was for you to take money out, the more likely it is that Americans wanted to commit their money to it. And most people believe, as we examine these results, that investors actually want some handcuffs because they don't trust themselves to save for long-term goals. So it raises interesting questions about penalties associated with early withdrawals from IRAs, 401ks, 529 plans, things we talk about on this show all the time. And turns out maybe investors are actually looking for more of this type of thing rather than less of it. So definitely food for thought. All right, up next we're going to be talking to Chad Kritzas, our real estate pro at Keller Williams Realty. We're going to be talking multifamily houses. Stay with us, there's more to come. Welcome back to the Money Pros. I'm joined now by our real estate money pro, Chad Kritzas with Keller Williams Realty. Chad, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Interesting topic because we talk about investments on the show all the time. So really we're talking about investment real estate here. So we're going to talk about multifamilies, which is something that's not entirely unique to New England, but it's definitely got a New England flavor to it. Before we jump into that, though, we always have you talk about how the real estate market overall is doing here in Rhode Island, and where, as we're taping this, we're mid-March, so you probably have a flavor for at least how the first quarter of 2017 is going. What can you tell us about it?
It's probably the best market I've seen in 18 years. It's multiple offers like we've been talking about. I mean, as we said, it's mid-March. We really didn't have any big snowstorms this year again, kind of like last year, so we really didn't have any winter slowdown. December, January, February, very strong. March is crazy. The big issue, and something we'll probably be talking about a couple times today, is the inventory is so low.
I was just going to ask you about that.
Yeah, so sellers, the big thing right now is there's very few homes for sale. Actually, it's down 13% over this time last year, which when you have rising sale numbers and less inventory is a big, catch-22.
And it's important to point out, it sounds like that you'd expect inventory to go down over the winter, but you're talking about from this time last year. So you're comparing apples to apples,
right,
and it's even down from that period. So relative to probably where it was June of last year, it's way down.
Way down. But I mean, January to January, 13% down. I mean, that's a huge drop in inventory numbers, especially in the middle of winter.
So we've seen a bump up in mortgage rates, but it's really not.
Yeah, but it's still not.
It's still low, right?
It's still low. I mean,
but that definitely hasn't checked any activity to this point.
Definitely not. I mean, the more single families alone, and I know we're talking multifamily, single families alone were up 21% January over January. So 21% up, but inventory is down 13%. You're driving offers up.
So real estate market's hot. And we're going to be talking about a specific portion of the real estate market, which is the multifamily, residential property. Now, I realize that multifamilies aren't, like I said in the open, aren't unique to Rhode Island, to New England. But when we're talking about a multifamily around here, what are we usually talking about? Because it sort of comes in a certain flavor, I've found.
Well, it matters what market you really work in. And I mean, I'd love to say I really work in all of Rhode Island because it's so small, but we kind of get generalized in a certain area.
Sure.
So are you talking a 12-unit tenement in Woonsocket or a 3-unit building in downtown Newport? So it's really the different animals. I mean, you get Providence with apartment buildings and big apartment buildings. And
triple deckers and things like that. Right. We think of a lot, old mill housing and stuff like that, right? And then what does it look like in Newport?
Newport's probably a lot of smaller units, and I'm talking more on the residential side, not from the city side, but mostly 2, 3-unit buildings, or sometimes even 4. Well, you saw a few years ago, and we saw again, probably I wasn't doing real estate in the 80s, but the bigger 6, 7, 8-unit buildings, basically by right in the city of Newport, you can make condos out of those. So if they're an established 8-unit condo that meets zoning, you can apartment building, you can make condos out of those. So over the past couple of decades, investors have been buying those, developing them into condos, and then selling those off. So you don't see as many big 4+ unit buildings in Newport anymore.
So you typically see it as the 2, 3-unit type thing that we're talking about. Are people still building them?
We don't have that much land left, right? In St. Bristol, Warren, wherever you are, it's just, the areas are so developed, there's just not that much land to develop it.
So that's certainly going to impact the inventory that's available. So when we're talking about multifamily housing, what areas of Rhode Island, I know you focus primarily in the East Bay, in Aquidneck Island and things like that, but just generally speaking, what areas are the hottest areas for multifamily properties?
Well, it matters what you're looking to do. So if you're looking to do a seasonal rental and capitalize on the kind of the summer market, then you're going to be looking more East Bay, Newport County, Narragansett, South Kingstown, down that way. If you're looking to do long-term, investment, you might be looking more into the cities. It matters. It's harder in a city like Newport to, if you're going to just do year-round rentals, to really cover your nut every month on something you may pay a lot for. Like I just listed a 4-unit building for over $800,000. I mean, that's $200,000 a unit. That's it's expensive. I mean, you're
Right.
paying for the premium.
So are you saying that in that situation, if it was going to be kept as a rental property, that it would have to be a seasonal type rental where they could get more rent for it in season, which obviously is summer in Newport? Is that what we're talking about here?
It is, and also you got to look at how. I mean, you're the investment guy in the room, but how are you looking at this investment? Are you looking at your rental property to make you dollars every month?
Positive cash flow. Like,
Right.
are you looking for an income out of it?
Right, or is the opposite? Or are you just looking at the gain over a 10 or 20-year period?
Can I just pay and build equity and maybe
Right.
I cash out of it in 5, 10, 15 years, right?
I mean, historically, real estate, if you take MLS as a whole, and you have some big ups and downs, but you take real estate as a whole in MLS, it goes up 4% a year. So if you hold on to that piece of property for 10, 20 years, and let's even say longer, let's say you use it as a retirement tool, right? You pay it off, now you have 3 units paying you rent every month, where really all you have to pay for is maintenance and taxes. I mean, I own rental property, and that's how I look at it. Is, some might break even, some might make a few bucks, some might lose a few bucks, but in 10 years or 15 years when they're all paid off, that's just
Should
positive
all
cash
be
flow.
worth a lot more than what you started with. So we started off talking about how the overall real estate market is in Rhode Island. What's the multifamily market look like in Rhode Island right now?
All right, so year over year, January to January, number of sales up 20% from last year. Prices up 20%. Now we go 2 years back, go even further. Prices are up 18% over 2 years. Units for sale, once again, inventory, down 37%
From 2 years ago.
from 2 years ago, and the sold units are up 31%. So once again, you have this giant gain in sales with a complete decrease of inventory. So sellers that are thinking that they need to wait to sell their home or they're waiting for warm weather, I've never seen a better time for sellers to sell real estate.
So in the key factors here that we look at with any investment, and we talk about it all the time with real estate, inventory is way down.
Way down.
So there's just not a lot of properties to select from. And whether it's a chicken and egg thing, prices are way up. So we were talking about the average 4% rate of return,
Right.
at least in the past couple of years on multifamily property. It's been substantially better than that. Do you see bidding wars and things like that when
All
we're
the time.
talking about good multifamily properties?
Yeah, you see them, single families, condos if they're priced right. We're seeing multiple offers on almost anything as long as it's priced accordingly. I mean, buyers are very educated, right? It's not like the old days where MLS was in a book. I mean, you can go on Zillow, Realtor, Trulia, any of these big search engines, and you can see recent sales. So buyers are very educated. They're not going to come in and just pay this exorbitant price because there's nothing else to choose from. They'll just wait for something better to come on.
I'm curious, do you see much impact from, we almost see what I would describe as corporate real estate investors coming in to buy, you hear about like ads on the radio, programs to buy rental property,
REITs, yep.
things like that. Do you see those bigger organizations having an impact on the market, or are most of the buyers sort of local to the market? Know Rhode Island, have been here a while. What's your sense there?
In my world, it's more local, or even other New England states, right? They may primarily live in Connecticut or Boston or New York, but they own rental properties in Newport. They may own a vacation home in Newport. In my world, it's more residential owners or less corporations.
Right. So let's talk about people that might be watching, and they've always had it in the back of their heads. Investment real estate, multifamily, maybe makes sense. I knew somebody that did it. I had a relative that did it. Whatever it is. But they've never done it before, and they make the move to come to you and say, "Hey, Chad, this is something I'm seriously thinking about doing." What are the things that you talk to them about to consider whether it's the right thing for them, and then if in fact it is the right thing, how to choose the property?
Okay, so I think you need to identify what it is you're looking to invest in. You're looking to invest in multiple single-family homes that may get a higher rate of return or higher rent, but may also cost you more monthly. You got to look at down payment, pre-approval, and the rental income. Now, if you're dealing with downtown Bristol or downtown Newport, you can do weekly. Well, you can't do weekly in the city of Newport unless you're in a certain block and limited business general business downtown. So you got to look at, do you want to do seasonal rentals? But when you do seasonal rentals, you got to ask the question, who's your winter tenant? A lot of times a college student, right? And we were all college students at one point.
Sure,
And
that was a big deal in Narragansett.
yeah, and not always your gentlest tenants on the property.
Perhaps not.
Right? So, I mean, I do all mine year round just because it's easier to manage and handle and you don't have to turn over. I had a gentleman in Portsmouth, believe it or not, he has a waterfront home in Portsmouth. He's getting $4,300 a week. And you take a property like that, at $4,300 a week in the summer, I mean, that's big money. It's over $16,000 a month.
Right. What about maintenance? And I'm not sure if I've ever mentioned this on the show before, but the first house I ever bought was a 3-family, and I did it because my father-in-law owned them, and I saw that he was successful with them, and I said, I think this is something that we could probably do, and bought a 3-family. And this may come as a surprise to Money Pro viewers, but I'm a pretty handy guy. It may come as a surprise. So it wasn't so bad when I lived in it, and I could take care of it, and I didn't mind doing that. But as soon as I was a absentee landlord, and in this case I moved out of state, so it became really difficult.
Much more difficult.
Do you talk to people about, like, hey, having tenants is it's a 24/7, 365 kind of job to some extent. How are you going to manage the maintenance and things like that?
Well, you're right. So that's the question. You're going to have a property manager locally who's going to manage your property, keep an eye on your property every week. But you also have to pay them, right? So there's another expense in your profit and loss statement. It matters. Your tenants are going to call you at 1 in the morning if their heat goes down.
Right.
Your phone is
Or
going
they
to ring.
can't get their garage door open, or any number
Or I
of
love it, they
things.
flip the emergency switch on the furnace and they call you because the furnace isn't working and you pay the plumber $200.
Yes.
It happens.
But these are the conversations you have to have with this person that comes into your office, because it's not all about what you see on HGTV about cash and rent checks
Definitely
and
not
moving on
that
to the
easy.
next property. All right, there's probably a lot more to talk about here, Chad, but we're out of time, so we'll hold it there. But thanks for all the
very
great
much.
information as usual. All right, up next on the Money Pros, we're going to be talking about why Pat Boone is not the person you want to be listening to when you get your investment advice. Stay tuned, there's more to come here on the Money Pros. Welcome back to the Money Pros. So in this segment, I want to share a little bit of a pet peeve. Some of these things sort of, just irritate me when I see them, and I want to use the opportunity on the Money Pros to talk about them. And the latest one is Pat Boone. So you may be familiar with him, a singer who's, I think his heyday was probably in the 60s, definitely not my style of music and not exactly my time, but for those of you that are Pat Boone fans, that's all good. In fact, I kind of wish that he would just stick to the entertainment industry. I believe he was an actor also, and I'm probably dating myself here, but I really wish he'd stay away from giving investment advice. I'm not sure if you've seen the commercials. He advertises for a company called Swiss America, and he talks about the importance of gold as an investment. And one of the ironies here is that Swiss America is actually based in Phoenix, Arizona, so it's not the cached private Swiss bank account that you might be envisioning when you think about investing in gold with him. And one of the things that I don't like about the commercial is the undertone that gold will keep you safe from the pending failure of the American banking system. Now, I'm not going to be here to tell you that the American banking system hasn't had its share of problems, but in reality, that is going to be the safest place for you to possibly put your money. It's insured by the United States of America. And you know what? There's very few, if any, alternatives that are going to be any safer on the risk spectrum. But he talks about how wonderful gold is as a store of value. And so you have this general pitch of banks are going to fail and you really need to own gold because it's the best investment for the coming era. And I don't know whether that era is the zombie apocalypse or North Korea hitting us with nuclear weapons or what in the world he's alluding to, but it all smacks of sort of Armageddon. But let me put a graph up and see if I can put some reason to this point. So this graph goes from 1979 all the way through to today. And what it's illustrating is a $10,000 investment. And that heavy blue line is the $10,000. So that would be you staying even. And that more jagged blue line is the value of your $10,000 if you invested it in gold in 1979. And you can see by 2002, you would have really been wishing you hadn't stuck all your money in gold, because it took until 2014 for that investment to recover. And if you compared your $10,000 invested in gold in 1979 to what it's actually invested in today, you'd actually have lost a little bit of money. So much for that store of value thing. There's one other line on here I want to point out, and that's that green line. Guess what that green line is? It's the march of inflation. So that $10,000 investment, to just keep your money the same, you'd need about $36,000 in the bank just to be able to buy the same basket of goods and services. So not only did gold since 1979 actually lose money on a real dollar basis, but it also lost money on an inflation-adjusted basis. I think gold is really a pretty lousy investment. It's not part of my client portfolios, and one of the reasons for that is when we look for an asset class to put into a portfolio, one of our most important criteria is it's got to provide long-term real return, which means return in excess of inflation. And I can easily demonstrate that gold does not do that. But you got to wonder, why is Pat Boone hawking gold? If you call Swiss America, they're not just going to try to sell you gold bullion, just gold. They're actually going to try to sell you gold coins. So why gold coins? And the question is, if they sell it to you, what are they going to take from you in exchange? They're going to take cash. Well, if they don't believe that cash in the American banking system is safe, why would they want to give up their gold for your money? My advice is hang on to your cash. If you really want to be conservative, stick it in the bank where it's FDIC insured, and don't take your investment advice from Pat Boone. So that's my little tirade for today. All right, up next, we're going to answer a viewer question on contributing to an IRA. So stay with us. There's more to come right here on the Money Pros. Hey, welcome back to the Money Pros. Got a question. Actually, this is a question from a client. I thought it was a good one that we should share with the Money Pros audience. So let me put it up on the screen here. My wife and I turned 70 and a half last year and had to take required minimum distributions from our IRAs. But I still work. Can we make a 2016 contribution to our IRAs and take the tax deduction? Great question, right? You still have income. You'd like to be able to contribute to your IRA, get the deduction. But last year you turned 70 and a half, so you're required to take your required minimum distribution. In fact, you are not entitled to make a traditional IRA contribution. And it's a little convoluted when you go to the IRA website and read the explanation. It makes it seem like you might be eligible the year after. But in fact, the year that you turn 70 and a half, that year that you have to take your required minimum distribution, you are no longer eligible then or at any point afterwards to make a contribution to an IRA. So unfortunately, that has come to an end. If you've got a question for any of the Money Pros, including me, please be sure to contact us. You can email me, moneypros@foxprovidence.com. You hit us up on Facebook. You can even go to the foxprovidence.com website. We answer all our questions. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, folks. We'll see you again next time.